The hospital stood quiet under the late-night sky, its tall glass windows glowing softly in the darkness. Inside, the air smelled of medicine, disinfectant, and something heavier, fear mixed with exhaustion. Doctors moved quickly through the corridors, their faces tense, voices low. Everyone knew who was inside the intensive care unit that night. The man lying on the bed was not an ordinary patient. He was known across the city as someone people did not speak about openly. His power had reached government offices, police stations, and dark corners of the streets. When he walked free, doors opened. When he was angry, people disappeared. Many called him heartless. Some called him a monster. Most simply stayed silent. Now he lay still. Machines surrounded him. Blinking lights and soft beeping sounds filling the room. Tubes ran for his arms and chest. His skin looked pale, almost gray. Hours earlier, he had been rushed in after a violent attack. Blood loss had been severe. His heart had stopped more than once. Every second since then had been a fight between life and death. The doctors had tried everything they knew. Surgery had gone on longer than expected. More blood had been pumped into his body than they could count. Medications were pushed again and again. Nothing worked. Near midnight, the lead doctor finally stepped back. His shoulders dropped. Sweat covered his forehead. He looked at the heart monitor, then at his team. There was no rhythm left. The room went silent except for the long, flat sound of the machine. Time of death was noted. One by one, the staff slowly removed their gloves. No one celebrated. No one spoke loudly. Even though this man had caused pain to many, death still carried weight. A body was still a body. A life was still a life. Outside the room, several large men in dark suits stood frozen. They had guarded him for years. Some had taken bullets for him. Others had carried out orders they never spoke about again. When they heard the words, their faces tightened. A few looked down at the floor. Others stared straight ahead, unsure what came next. The hospital staff knew this death would not be simple. Paperwork would take time. Authorities would be involved. The body would remain in the room until everything was cleared. As the night grew deeper, the hospital became quieter. Fewer footsteps, dimmer lights. On the same floor, far from the attention and tension, a cleaning woman pushed a small cart slowly down the hallway. She wore a faded uniform and worn shoes. Her movements were careful and quiet, like someone used to not being noticed. She worked nights because it paid a little extra, and because she had no other choice. Life had not been kind to her. Her days were long, her pay small. She had lost her husband years ago to illness, and since then, every decision she made was about survival. She cleaned offices, hallways, and hospital rooms while the city slept. With her that night was her toddler. The child was small, wrapped in an old blanket, sleeping on a chair near the staff area. She could not afford childcare, and the hospital supervisors allowed it as long as the child stayed out of the way. Most nights, the child slept quietly, unaware of the world around him. As the woman worked, she glanced back often to check on the sleeping child. Each look was full of worry and love. She moved faster, hoping to finish early so they could go home. She noticed the guards near the intensive care room, but said nothing. She did not ask questions. Asking questions in places like this was never a good idea. At some point during the night, the child stirred. Small eyes opened. The hallway lights looked strange and bright. The child slipped off the chair, blanket dragging behind. Bare feet touched the cold floor. There was no fear, only curiosity. The woman was busy cleaning another section and did not notice right away. The child toddled down the hallway, drawn by a soft glow from a room with its door slightly open. Inside, machines blinked slowly. The air felt warm. The intensive care room was quiet now. No doctors, no nurses, just a body on the bed and the sound of equipment that had not yet been turned off. The child pushed the door wider and stepped inside. To the child, the man on the bed did not look dangerous. He looked like someone sleeping, someone big, someone warm. With the simple trust only children have, the toddler climbed up using the side rail, struggled for a moment, then crawled onto the bed. He curled against the man's chest, resting his head there, as if it were the most natural place in the world. The child sighed and fell asleep. Hours passed. In the hallway, the cleaning woman finished her work and returned to check on her child. The chair was empty. Her heart jumped. She called his name softly. No answer. Panic rushed through her body. She searched the nearby rooms, the restroom, the corners of the hallway. With every second, fear grew stronger. Her hands began to shake. Then she noticed the ICU door open wider than before. She stepped closer. Her breath held. Inside, she saw her child. For a moment, she could not move. The toddler was asleep on the chest of the man everyone feared, hugging him like a pillow. Her legs felt weak. She rushed forward, ready to grab her child and run. Then she froze. Something was wrong. She heard a faint sound, not from the hallway, from the machine. She turned her head slowly toward the monitor. A small line moved. It was not flat. Her breath caught in her throat. She did not understand machines. She did not understand medicine. But she understood one thing clearly. The man declared dead was not completely gone. Her voice broke the silence. She screamed for help. Footsteps rushed in from every direction. Lights flipped on. Nurses ran. Doctors followed, disbelief written on their faces. They pushed past her and looked at the screen. Then they looked again. The impossible stared back at them. A pulse. Weak, unsteady, but real. The night that was supposed to end quietly had just begun. The room that had been silent only minutes earlier was now filled with noise. Nurses moved quickly around the bed. One doctor checked the monitor again and again, as if he did not trust his own eyes. Another reached for equipment that had already been packed away. The cleaning woman stood frozen near the door, holding her child tightly against her chest. The small line on the monitor moved again. It was faint, slow, but it was there. The lead doctor stepped closer and pressed 2 fingers against the man's neck. He waited. His face showed deep focus. For a few long seconds, nothing seemed certain. Then he felt it. A weak pulse. He looked at his team, his voice no longer calm. He ordered them to reconnect the machines fully and prepare emergency support. The room that had already accepted death was now fighting for life again. The toddler began to cry, confused by the sudden bright lights and loud voices. The mother rocked him gently, whispering soft words, though her own body was shaking. She did not understand what was happening. All she knew was that her child had been lying on a man who was declared dead. One nurse gently guided her out of the room. The door closed behind them, but she could still hear the urgent voices inside. In the hallway, the guards stood alert. They had heard the scream. They had seen the doctors rush back in. Something was different now. One of them stepped forward and asked what was happening, but no one answered clearly. Inside, doctors worked carefully but quickly. Oxygen was pushed back into the lungs. Warm fluids were given. They checked brain response again. It was still very weak, but no longer absent. One of the younger doctors whispered that this was medically rare. Sometimes a body can appear lifeless when it is not fully gone. The heart can slow so much that machines barely detect it. It does not happen often, but it happens. The lead doctor did not speak. He focused only on the patient. He had signed the papers. He had said the words. Now, he needed to be sure. Minutes passed like hours. The pulse grew slightly stronger. Not stable. Not safe. But stronger. In the hallway, the cleaning woman sat down on a bench, holding her child close. Tears rolled down her face, though she did not know why. Fear, shock, relief, all mixed together. She kept thinking about what she had seen. The small moving line, the sound of the machine. A nurse approached her quietly. "How did your child get inside?" The nurse asked, not in anger, but in confusion. The woman lowered her eyes. She explained that she had been cleaning and had not noticed when her child walked away. She apologized again and again. She was afraid of losing her job. This job was everything to her. The nurse looked at the toddler, who was now calmer, resting his head on his mother's shoulder. The nurse then said something that surprised her. "If he had not gone inside, we might not have noticed in time." The woman did not understand. The nurse explained softly. The child's body warmth, pressed against a man's chest for hours, may have slowed the cooling of his body. That warmth could have helped keep some circulation active. It was not magic. It was simple human heat. The woman looked down at her child differently now. She kissed his hair gently. Inside the room, the doctors finally stepped back. The man's heart was beating on its own again, though supported by machines. His condition was still critical. He was not awake. He was not stable. But he was alive. The lead doctor removed his glasses and wiped his face. He had been in medicine for decades, yet nights like this reminded him how little control humans truly have. He gave strict instructions. No public announcement yet. No information to the press. Only essential staff should know. The situation was delicate. Outside, the guard began receiving phone calls. Word had already started to spread through quiet channels. Some believed it was a rumor. Others believed it was a miracle. The hospital suddenly felt like the center of something much bigger than medical care. The cleaning woman was asked to stay for questioning, but not in a harsh way. Hospital administration needed to document everything. She explained the timeline carefully. When she last saw her child asleep, when she noticed he was missing, when she entered the room, every detail mattered. She spoke honestly. She had nothing to hide. One administrator asked if she had touched any equipment. She shook her head quickly. She had only picked up her child. They wrote everything down. Hours passed. The sky outside slowly began to lighten. Morning was coming. The toddler, unaware of the tension, began play with the edge of his mother's scarf. He smiled at a passing nurse. Life for him was simple. Finally, the lead doctor came out of the ICU room. His expression was serious, but calm. "He is alive," he said quietly. The guards exchanged looks. Some showed relief. Some looked worried. Survival meant consequences. It meant unfinished business. It meant power returning. But inside the hospital, it simply meant that a heart was beating again. The doctor then turned toward the cleaning woman. "Your child helped save him," he said. The words fell heavy. She did not know how to respond. She was just a worker who cleaned floors. Her child was just a toddler who wandered into the wrong room. She had never imagined being connected to someone so powerful. "We cannot explain everything," the doctor continued, "but the time it mattered." She nodded slowly. The hospital staff arranged for her to rest in a small room for a while. They did not send her home immediately. Too many questions were still floating around. Inside the ICU, the man remained unconscious. His face looked different now. Without movement, without anger, without authority. He looked like any other patient fighting for survival. A machine pumped air steadily. Another measured blood pressure. The steady rhythm of the heart monitor now felt like a quiet victory. As morning fully arrived, sunlight entered through the window and touched his face. Outside, the world continued as usual. Traffic moved. Shops opened. People argued over small things. No one knew how close this night had come to ending a powerful life forever. By midday, hospital security tightened. Only selected visitors were allowed near the floor. Rumors had reached too many ears. The cleaning woman finally prepared to leave. She held her child hand as they walked slowly toward the exit. Before stepping out, she turned once more toward the ICU hallway. She did not feel proud. She did not feel important. She felt something else. Strained connection. For years, that man had ruled through fear. People moved away when he entered a room. They lowered their eyes. They stepped aside. But her child had climbed onto his chest without hesitation. No fear, no judgment, only warmth. As she stepped outside into the fresh air, she whispered a quiet prayer. Not for money, not for power, just for peace. Behind her, inside the building, doctors continued watching the monitors carefully. They knew the next few days would be critical. Recovery was uncertain. Damage had been done. But one thing was certain. The story that was supposed to end in silence had taken a different turn. A man once declared gone was breathing again. And the reason began with a small child who did not know who he was supposed to fear. The days that followed were slow and heavy, like time itself had decided to move carefully. Inside the intensive care unit, the man remained unconscious. Machines breathed for him, watched his heart, measured every small change. Doctors came in shifts, studying numbers, whispering to one another, never fully relaxed. Outside the room, The guards rotated quietly. They spoke less than before. Phones rang often, but conversations were short. Everyone wanted answers, yet no one truly had them. The cleaning woman did not return to her usual night shift right away. The hospital administration told her to stay home for a few days. They said it was for rest, but she sensed there was more behind the decision. Still, she did not argue. She took her child home and tried to return to her normal life. But nothing felt normal anymore. Every night, as she put her child to sleep, her mind returned to that room, the machines, the quiet body. The moment she saw the monitor move, she had cleaned hundreds of rooms in her life, but none had followed her home like that one. At the hospital, something small but important began to change. On the third day, a nurse noticed movement. At first, it was only a slight twitch of the fingers, so small it could have been mistaken for a reflex. The nurse watched closely, then called a doctor. They waited. The fingers moved again. The lead doctor stepped closer and spoke the man's name softly, testing for response. There was no clear reaction, but the brain scan showed slight improvement. The body was fighting. Word spread quickly among the staff. Hope entered the room carefully, like something fragile that could break if handled too roughly. Later that day, the man's eyes opened for a brief moment. They were unfocused, confused, but open. He did not speak. He did not move much. But that moment changed everything. The guards were informed. Messages traveled fast through quiet channels. The world outside the hospital began to shift its expectations. The doctors remained cautious. They warned everyone not to assume recovery. Waking up was only the beginning. Damage had been done. The heart had stopped too many times. The brain had been without oxygen longer than they liked. Still, life was there. In the following days, the man drifted in and out of awareness. Sometimes he responded to voices. Sometimes he did not. His breathing slowly became less dependent on machines. Each small improvement felt like a victory, but no one celebrated loudly. One afternoon, as sunlight filled the room, he became awake for longer than before. His eyes moved slowly, taking in the ceiling, the lights, the unfamiliar stillness. His face showed confusion, then discomfort. A doctor noticed and leaned closer. He asked simple questions. Could he hear? Did he know where he was? The man blinked. It was enough. Later that evening, when the room was quiet again, he spoke for the first time. His voice was weak, dry, almost unrecognizable compared to the strong tone people feared. Why am I here? He asked. The doctor answered calmly. He explained the attack, the surgery, the long night. He did not mention death right away. The man closed his eyes as if listening from far away. Then he asked a question that no one expected. Who was on my chest? The doctor paused. He asked what the man meant. The man swallowed slowly. Before the darkness, he said, there was weight. Small, warm. I thought it was a dream. The doctor felt a chill. He explained carefully about the child, about the cleaning woman, about the night when his heart returned. The man listened in silence. No anger crossed his face. No disbelief. Only stillness. When the explanation ended, the room remained quiet for a long moment. Then the man whispered, I wasn't alone. The doctor nodded. From that day, something shifted inside the room. The man asked fewer questions about power, enemies, or plans. He asked instead about time, about how many days had passed, about whether it was morning or night. He asked once more about the child. The doctor answered again. The request that followed surprised everyone. He wanted to see the child. The doctors were unsure. The administration hesitated. Security raised concerns. But the man insisted, not with threats, not with anger, but with a quiet certainty. Arrangements were made carefully. The cleaning woman received a message asking her to return to the hospital. Fear returned instantly. She worried that she was in trouble, that something had gone wrong. She dressed her child neatly and traveled back with a heavy heart. When she was led into the room, she barely recognized the man. Without the sharp suits, without the confident posture, without the cold eyes, he looked smaller, fragile, human. He looked at the child. The child looked back. There was no fear, The toddler smiled. Something in the man's face broke. Tears filled his eyes quietly. He turned his head slightly, embarrassed by a feeling he did not know how to control. The woman stood still, unsure of what to do. She held her child close, ready to leave if asked. The man raised a weak hand slowly. "Thank you," he said. The words were simple, but they carried weight. He did not say more. He did not need to. The meeting was short. Doctors insisted on rest. The woman and her child were guided out gently. As she left, she realized something strange. She was no longer afraid. In the days that followed, the man continued to improve slowly. He listened more. He spoke less. He stared out the window for long periods, watching life move on without him. For the first time in years, he was not in control, and for the first time, he did not seem to want to be. Inside his quiet room, surrounded by machines and soft footsteps, a powerful man began to understand how close he had come to disappearing. Not through violence, not through betrayal, but through silence. And it was the warmth of a small child that pulled him back. The world outside still saw him as feared. But inside that room, something else was being born. A pause, a question, and the beginning of change. Recovery did not come quickly. It came in small pieces, measured in hours and careful steps. Some days were better than others. On good days, the man could sit up with help. On harder days, he barely spoke and slept through the light. Doctors warned everyone that healing was not only physical. The mind needed time too. The body had been pushed to its edge, and the silence he had touched did not let go easily. The guards noticed changes first. He no longer asked for constant updates. He did not demand phones or visitors. When reports were brought to him, he listened quietly and often waved them away. The men who once waited for sharp orders now stood unsure when to speak and when to stop. He spent more time looking out the window. From his bed, he could see a small park across the street. Children ran there in the afternoons. Parents sat on benches, tired but smiling. Life moved in simple ways, untouched by fear or power. It bothered him. For years, his world had been loud and fast. Meetings, arguments, deals made in dark rooms. He had believed control was everything. That fear kept order. That strength meant never slowing down. Now, lying still, he questioned things he had never questioned before. At night, sleep came and went. When he closed his eyes, he often felt it again. The small weight on his chest, the warmth, the steady breathing that did not ask for anything in return. He asked the doctors if the child was well. They said yes. He asked again a few days later. They said yes again. The cleaning woman returned to work after some time, but her duties changed. She was moved to daytime cleaning in quieter areas. The hospital explained it as a schedule adjustment, but she sensed care behind the decision. She was grateful, though she did not fully understand why this kindness had appeared now. She did her work the same way she always had. Head down, hands busy, no attention drawn. But eyes followed her. Some staff looked at her differently, not with envy, with curiosity. She tried not to notice. One afternoon, a hospital administrator called her into a small office. Her heart raced as she sat down, holding her bag tightly. The administrator spoke gently. He said the hospital wanted to help her and her child, not as a reward, not as payment, but as support. She was offered safer hours and a small raise. She thanked him quietly, fighting tears. Inside the intensive care room, the man was told of these changes. He nodded. It was not enough. He began asking his doctors deeper questions about how close he had come, about what it meant to be declared gone, about what people feel in their final moments. One doctor answered honestly. Sometimes, he said, people realize too late what mattered. The man said nothing. Days turned into weeks. He was moved from intensive care to a private recovery room. The machines were fewer now, the beeping softer. The room felt more like a place for healing than survival. Visitors were allowed, but he limited them. When trusted men came with updates, he listened without reaction. When they spoke of revenge or unfinished plans, he asked them to stop. This confused them. They had built their lives around his decisions. Without his direction, everything felt unstable. One evening, after everyone had left, He asked to be alone. The room grew quiet. He looked at his hands. Scarred, strong, hands that signed orders and ended lives without seeing faces. For the first time, those hands felt heavy. He thought about the child. A child who did not know his history, who did not know his reputation, who had trusted him without reason, trust without fear. It felt unfamiliar. The next morning, he asked for paper and a pen. This surprised the staff. He had never written anything himself. Others had always done that for him. He began slowly, carefully, pausing often to rest. He wrote instructions, not commands. Instructions. Some businesses were to be sold quietly. Certain operations were to be shut down. Funds were to be redirected. No violence. No threats. Just change. When his closest men read the pages, they did not speak. They read them twice, unsure if they understood correctly. He looked at them calmly. "I'm done," he said. The words were soft, but final. Resistance followed. Questions, warnings, fear of losing control. He listened. Then he closed his eyes. "I already lost everything once," he said. "I'm not afraid of losing it again." Silence filled the room. Slowly, one by one, they nodded. Outside the hospital, changes began quietly. Deals ended. Pressure lifted in certain places. People noticed, but no one understood why. Back inside, the man continued to heal. He walked with assistance. Then, without it, each step felt like a return to something new, not old. One afternoon, he asked to see the cleaning woman again. This time, she was less afraid. He did not speak of power or gratitude. He asked about her life, her work, her child. She answered honestly. They spoke as two people, not as positions. Before she left, he said something quietly. "You don't owe me anything." She nodded. "Neither do you," she replied. The word surprised them both. That night, he slept peacefully for the first time. The park outside filled with children the next day. Laughter reached his window. He watched, and for the first time in a long life, he felt something close to calm. Not power, not control, just calm. The world had not changed overnight, but he had, and the final steps were yet to come. The day he left the hospital did not feel like a victory parade. There were no cameras, no loud voices, no celebration. Just a quiet exit through a side door early in the morning when the city was still stretching awake. He walked slowly, assisted only by a cane. Each step reminded him of how close he had come to not walking at all. The air outside felt different from the air inside the hospital. It felt earned. A car waited. He paused before getting in and looked back at the building one last time. Behind those walls, his life had broken apart and rebuilt itself in a shape he did not yet fully understand. As the car moved away, he rested his head against the window and closed his eyes. The days that followed were quiet. He stayed away from his old places. No late-night meetings. No crowded rooms. No raised voices. His instructions had already been carried out. Businesses sold. Operations closed. The world he once ruled kept moving without him. Some people were confused. Others were relieved. A few were angry. He did not react. Instead, he focused on small things. He learned to cook simple meals. He walked slowly each morning, feeling the ground under his feet. He listened to the sounds of the city without trying to control them. At night, he slept better. Not perfectly, but better. One afternoon, he asked his driver to stop near a public park. The same park he had watched from the hospital window. He did not get out right away. Children ran across the grass. A group played with a ball. Parents sat nearby, tired but smiling. The scene was ordinary, yet it held a kind of peace he had never known. Then he saw the child. The toddler was there with his mother. He recognized him instantly. The woman sat on a bench, watching carefully as her child explored the playground. Her posture was relaxed now, lighter. Life still held struggles for her, but fear no longer sat on her shoulders. He stayed inside the car. He did not want to interrupt. He simply watched. The child laughed as he stumbled and stood up again. The sound reached him like something warm. It reminded him of that night, of the darkness, of the warmth that had pulled him back. After some time, He asked the driver to leave. He did not need more. Behind the scenes, changes continued quietly. Funds were set aside without announcements. Education accounts were created without names attached. A better home became available to the cleaning woman through a legal process that did not involve favors or pressure. She never knew where it came from. She did not ask. She only accepted it with gratitude and moved forward. At work, she remained the same person. Kind, quiet, focused, but her life slowly became easier. Not rich, not perfect, just safer. Back in his own quiet space, the man spent time thinking. He thought about how fear had ruled his choices, how power had blinded him, how easily people had obeyed, not because they believed in him, but because they were afraid of him. He understood now that fear creates silence, not respect. And silence is lonely. Weeks passed. One evening, he sat alone and wrote again. This time, it was not instructions. It was reflection. Words he never planned to show anyone. He wrote about control, about loss, about the strange mercy of a child who did not know his name or his past. He stopped often, resting his hand, breathing slowly. For the first time, writing felt honest. One morning, he made a choice. He asked to visit the hospital again, not as a patient, as a person. He walked through the halls quietly, unnoticed by most. Doctors passed him without realizing who he was. Nurses smiled politely. He stopped near the area where the cleaning woman worked. He did not approach her. He did not want thanks or recognition. Instead, he left an envelope with the hospital administration. Inside was a donation meant only for staff support and childcare assistance. No names, no conditions. Then he left. Time continued moving. People spoke less about him. New stories replaced old ones. Fear faded into memory. One afternoon, he returned to the park. This time, he stepped out of the car. He sat on a bench at a distance. The child was there again, playing freely. The toddler noticed him and waved. He hesitated. Then he waved back. The child smiled and returned to playing. No questions, no expectations, just a moment shared. The mother noticed and nodded politely, unaware of who he truly was. To her, he was just another man sitting quietly in the park. And that felt right. As the sun lowered, he stood and prepared to leave. Before walking away, he looked at the child one last time, not with guilt, not with fear, but with gratitude. He understood something now. Life does not always change through big actions. Sometimes it changes through small moments, through warmth, through innocence, through a child who simply chose to rest. That night, as he returned home, he felt no urge to reclaim what he once had. He felt no hunger for control, only a quiet promise to live differently. The man who once ruled through fear had been declared gone. In his place stood someone else, not powerful, not feared, just alive. And sometimes that is the greatest change of all.